Clauses 19 and 20.
The question is that clauses 19 and 20 stand part of the bill. The question is that clause 19 and 20 stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 19 and 20 now stand part of the bill.
Clause 21.
The question is that clause 21 stand part of the bill. Senator Richards, you had an amendment suggested. Sorry?
Yes.
Out of protocol, I must go to the Attorney General first.
Yes, may it please you, Chair. I have an amendment to propose, Section 21(1)(e). After the words drug rehabilitation. Sorry,
21(1)(e).
E. After the words public awareness, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, yes. So it reads, the monies in the fund may only be applied in defraying the following expenditure. E, research, training, education, public awareness. After public awareness, I would like to add the words drug rehabilitation and other related matters.
Noted. Senator Richards.
Given the Attorney General's, thank you, Chair. Given the Attorney General's proposed amendment, I withdraw mine and defer to the Attorney General's.
Thank you. Senator Lashmidial, you had a suggestion, a proposed amendment for 21(1). Senator Mark, you want to take that?
Attorney General, we would like
Senator
to...
Mark, what you are asking to be inserted here as a insert F,
yes,
has already been taken into consideration by both the Attorney General and also Senator Richards by inserting after awareness in E, drug rehabilitation.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
All right, so that has been taken into consideration. Do you withdraw?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
great.
Yes. May I ask the Attorney General whether, Chairman, I have withdrawn, but I just want to ask the Attorney General through you,
sure,
whether he would want to consider including additional areas of focus and responsibility. For example, what I was thinking about Attorney General is like awarding in communities that are going to be affected, right? Asking this body to defray some of its expenses in areas like granting of scholarships, apprenticeship program, and such opportunities so that we can try to help those persons who have become victims of this drug that is going to, affect them ultimately. So I was just wondering if you would not consider other initiatives to help those persons who might fall victims of this drug, the impact of this drug.
Senator Mark, how would you like it to read?
Well, I wanted to suggest to the Attorney General the provision of scholarship opportunities, right? Inclusive of apprenticeship programs for those adversely impacted by substance use individually and in families and or in communities. So that is what I was thinking, Attorney General.
Attorney General.
Senator Mark, there's a principle in law of construction, it's known as ejusdem generis. That is to say, what is specified explains what also is included. And when you look at 21(1)(e), the monies in the fund may be applied in defraying the following expenditure: E, research, training, education, public awareness, and other related matters, so that it will be within the contemplation of this legislation and the board to defray expenses such as you've mentioned without having to propose a further amendment.
Thank you, Attorney General. The question is that clause 21 be amended as circulated. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable Senators, the question is that clause 21 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 21 as amended now stands part of the bill.
Clauses 22 and 23.
Any amendments? The question is that clauses 22 and 23 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 22 and 23 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 22 to 23 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 24.
The question is that clause 24 stand part of the bill. I have a suggestion, a proposed amendment here by Senator Jayanti, Lakshmi Diyal. Senator Mark, would you like to?
Yeah.
Now,
Yes,
before you do, your amendment, your proposed amendment, it's a very lengthy one, and it deals with 24 and 25 at the same time. Okay? So, hold a second. So, although your table shows 24 and 25, we're going to be dealing with 24 only for now.
Only for 24.
Okay, so
all right.
go ahead.
Attorney General, I would like to suggest that, consistent with the Constitution and the entrenched provision therein, as it relates to the Auditor General, and no amendment can take place to that function unless there's a two-thirds majority. I would like us to be consistent with the Constitution and, in this regard, not outsource the functions of public monies as it relates to accountability and the auditing of the accounts to any outside auditing firm unless that is authorized by the Auditor General. And in this regard, I went to the HTC Act and I observed how it is done, right, consistent with the law. And it's against that background I have asked that we delete Section 24 and we replace it with what I have suggested, which would make it very clear that it is the Auditor General that has the responsibility for carrying out these functions consistent with the Constitution of the nation. So, Honorable Attorney General, I'd like you to consider this proposal. And as I said, the Constitution is very clear as it relates to which agency is responsible for auditing the public accounts of Trinidad and Tobago. Attorney General, would you believe?
Thank you, Senator Mark. The concerns that you have are without foundation, Senator Mark, because when you look at Section 24 of the bill, the accounts that are kept by the authority are made expressly subject to the Audit and Exchequer Act. You'll see that in Section 25(3), which reads, for the purposes of an audit conducted pursuant to this Act, the Exchequer and Audit Act shall apply as if the audit referred to in this part, which includes Section 24, is one to which that Act applies. And then Section 116 of the Constitution is cited next, Subsection 4, which is the vesting authority in the Constitution to the Auditor General, so that there are no concerns that can exist here that this Act is out with the Audit and Exchequer Act or the Constitution.
Thank you.
I therefore don't accept your recommendation
Thank you, Attorney
to
General.
delete 24.
Thank you, Attorney General. The question is that Clause 24 be amended as circulated by Senator Lochmidial and brought up by Senator Mark. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the noes have it. The question is that Clause 24 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 24 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 25.
The question is 25. Yeah. The question is that Clause 25 stand part of the bill. Attorney General, you have a suggested amendment for 25?
If you just give me 1 minute, please.
Sure.
Yes, sir. I propose at Clause 25(2), which at the moment begins, Clause 25(2) begins on completion of an audit of the authority, and I propose that when we reach to the words towards the end, over the page 20, which in the opinion of the Auditor General or the auditor is of sufficient importance to justify so doing, that those words be deleted.
Very well.
That the sentence would stop after the word audit at the top of page 20 in the first line.
Very well. Understood. The question is that, no, that went together. Senator Mark, you also have a suggestion for Clause 25?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Attorney General, can you explain in 25, which I am seeking to delete and replace, in your Clause 25, can you explain why the Auditor General, in accordance with what is written here, is being juxtaposed as it relates to performing a management audit? It could be done by the Auditor General, it could be done by some auditor engaged by the board or by the minister. Why are we having the minister getting involved in this matter or some auditor employed by the board when the Auditor General under the Constitution is the body responsible for conducting audits? And that is why I'm suggesting, Attorney General, that we really delete it completely. That is a function of the Auditor General, not the minister, and not an auditor employed by any authority.
Attorney General?
Senator Mark, 3 points. The recommendation by you to delete Section 25 in its entirety is an overreach. Second point is that it defeats the very purpose for which you were arguing earlier when you wanted to amend and delete 24. And the third point is, when you read Section 25 in its entirety, what Section 25 does, which is exactly what you want, is to preserve a function for the Auditor General under Section 116 of the Constitution and the Audit and Exchequer Act, and therefore I do not accept it should be deleted. Your 25 weakens the intent of Section 25 as it exists. Thank you.
Private auditor by the board when you have an already established constitutional office holder in the persona of the attorney, of the Auditor General. Why are we doing that?
Senator Mark, do you, would you like to withdraw your
No,
amendment?
no, I'm not
Okay.
withdrawing.
The question is that clause 25 be amended as circulated by Senator Mark. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the noes have it. The question is that clause 25 be amended as circulated by the Attorney General. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable Senators, the question is that clause 25 as amended now stands part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 25 as amended now stands part of the bill.
Clauses 26 to 28.
The question is that clauses 26 to 28 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 26 to 28 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 26 to 28 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 29.
The question is that clause 29 stand part of the bill. Attorney General, you had...
Thank you very much, Chair. I have one short amendment at clause 29, 1E. I propose that after the word dispensary, that the word pharmacy be introduced before the word dispensary. So it would read a retail distributor license which shall be issued to allow for the operation of a pharmacy or dispensary for the dispensing of medicinal cannabis to patients. I also have a further amendment at 29.3b, and that is simply to delete the words storage and.
So as circulated. Thank you, Attorney General. Senator Richards, you had...
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the Honourable Attorney General. During the committee, the Joint Select Committee's discussion, there was some commentary about if you are going to allow licenses for, as in 29(1)(a), harvesting, drying, growing, harvesting, drying, trimming, curing, or packaging cannabis, some sort of provision had to be made for storage, and that will be taken care of in terms of the parameters within which it will be stored, how it was to be stored, how much was permitted to be stored, and the manner in which it was stored will be dealt with by the secondary legislation, the regulation. So I would like some clarifications as to why it is being removed from 3B and not, as my proposal suggests, inserted in the other areas.
Thank you. May I?
You may.
Thank you, Senator Richards. We had relied on the implication that if you were handling it and distributing, you have to store it. But to make it abundantly clear, I have no objection to the suggested amendments that you proposed, 29, as laid out in your proposed amendments.
Thank you. And as I said, I guess the regulations would circumscribe how it is to be stored, how much it can be stored, how long it can be stored.
In greater particularity.
Thank you very much.
Senator Richards, there is B through G that you have suggested. Does your argument for storage carry through?
Yes, yes it does.
It does?
Yes.
Okay, very well. Senator Lashmidial, you also had a suggestion for...
Chair, yes, but I think I need to amend my amendment. I was suggesting replacing the words with the wholesalers, but what I think would make more sense is to add retailers, persons who hold a retail distributor's license under subsection E. So it should be instead, or the selling of cannabis and delete at wholesale and just include or the selling of cannabis to the holder of a license under B, C, D, E, or G. Because if the cultivator, no, and the reason behind this is because, as I said, to allow the cultivators to not have to apply for multiple licenses, you can allow them to sell and bypass the wholesaler and go directly to someone who holds, to the retailer, as opposed to if they wish to sell retail, they have to go for a retail license or not sell to a retailer and have to go through a wholesaler. So if they can sell to someone who has the R&D license, the laboratory, the processor, or a wholesaler, then they, or sell in a wholesale way, they could also be able to sell to the retailers directly. So why we can't include E there?
Attorney General?
Chair, I would prefer to stay with the language as circulated by the Attorney General's chambers at 29(1)A. Thank you. Because I think it sufficiently and adequately deals with the wholesale concept, and as I've already explained earlier, you then get the retailer distributor license at 29(1)E.
Chair, that is going to promote monopoly and create an oligarchy.
You know, I don't accept that, Mr. Senator Mark.
Just on a point of clarification, Mr. Chairman, through you, I would like to ask the Attorney General, as it relates to religious licenses, can the Attorney General indicate whether these licenses are legal under international obligations? Can you clarify for us? Because I've been getting all kinds of...
Exactly which part of 29 are you referring to?
No, I'm giving, if you go to 29, 3A. I'm just asking the Honorable Attorney General whether he can just clear the air for me as it relates to these religious trade licenses, whether they are legal under our international legal obligations, particularly as it relates to our international narcotics control convention. Can you guide me?
Attorney General.
Thank you, Senator Mark. I dealt with this in my winding up this afternoon, but to be more particular, and you will recall that I cited Section 4 of our Constitution. That is to say, we have a Constitution which prescribes for the fundamental human right of freedom of conscience and religious belief and observance. And Trinidad and Tobago is further a signatory to the Convention Against Illicit Traffic in Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances, the 1998 Convention, and Article 3.2 of that convention, which states, subject to its constitutional principles and the basic concept of its legal systems, each party shall adopt such measures as may seem necessary to establish as a criminal offense under its domestic law, when committed intentionally, the possession, purchase, or cultivation of narcotic drugs or psychotropic substances for personal consumption, contrary to the provisions of the 1961 Convention, etc. And there are academic papers that have examined that, and I am of the certain view, and the government is convinced, that we as a sovereign democratic country with a supreme law that guarantees religious freedom and observance have every right to pass domestic legislation that caters for the religious bodies and gatherings in our society.
Thank you, Attorney General. Senator Lachmidial, the 29... You just asked for clarification and the Attorney General gave you the clarification. No, Senator Mark, you asked for clarification. The clarification was given up in the winding up. It was then further clarified just now by the Attorney General. I don't think there's need for more clarification. I'm not holding you. I'm just saying he has clarified to the fullest as he can. Are you capable of further clarifying, Attorney General, or is that all we can say on the matter? Okay.
More clarity to what I've
Right.
said. sir.
Senator Mark, the answer has been given based upon your request. Senator Mark, you asked for clarification and clarification was given. Okay? That's why I'm chairman. Senator Lachmidial, are you withdrawing your suggestion, your amendment for clause 29?
Chair, with the greatest of respect, no, because I wasn't satisfied with the explanation.
Very
given.
well. So the question is that clause 29 be amended as circulated by Senator Lakshmi Dayal. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the noes have it. I think the noes have it. I only heard one no. But anyhow, if you want the division, go right ahead.
Mr. Amo,
Yes.
We're taking a vote. Reminder, we're taking a vote. If we accept the Senator Lakshmi Dayal's thing and amendment on 29(1). Yeah.
Wait, sorry. I
Mrs. Gopi Schoon, Mrs. Gopi Schoon,
Yeah, I was distracted. I was not following, and my apologies to you. And I ask if you would repeat.
No, I'm sorry, but
I would,
could you please repeat?
if the chair would.
just repeat what we voted on, please.
Okay, to remind everyone, Senator Lakshmi Dayal is not retracting her proposed amendment. Upon hearing one yes and many noes, Senator Mark asked for a division. We are now taking the vote as requested by Senator Mark's division for the amendment proposed by Senator Lakshmi Dayal for clause 29(1)(a). You may proceed.
Mrs. Gopi Schoon, Ms. Gopi,
No.
Mr. Sinanan,
No.
Ms. West,
No.
Mr. Mitchell,
No.
Ms. Cox,
No.
Mr. Bacchus,
No.
Mr. De Freitas,
No.
Mrs. Sagram Singh Sukla,
No.
Mrs. Lazama Lee Singh,
No.
Mr. Hislop,
No.
Mr. Boris,
No.
Mr. Thomas,
No.
Mr. Seals,
No.
Ms. Bethelmy,
No.
Mr. Mark,
Of course, yes.
Ms. Lakshmi Dayal,
Yes.
Mr. Richards, Mr. Vera,
No.
Dr. Dayal Singh,
No.
Ms. Sipasad,
No.
Mr. Tima,
No.
Mrs. Thompson Aye,
No.
Dr. Dylan Remy,
No.
Mr. Welch, Chairman, the result of the division is 2 members voted for, 23 against, there were 0 abstentions.
Thank you. The clause, the amendment,
No, you have to repeat it. You have to say,
the question is,
honorable members, the result of the division.
honorable members, the result of the division is that 22 voted for, 23 voted against,
There were 0 abstentions.
there were 0 abstentions.
Therefore,
Therefore, the clause as proposed, amended, does not carry. Honorable Senators, the question is, yes, correct. The question is that clause 29 be amended as circulated by the Attorney General and Senator Richards. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no.
Proposed amendment. Clause 29, 3D.
Attorney General, Senator Timal.
Concerning the subparagraph 3D, which deals with the religious export license, and as proposing that be deleted in the context that religious license being non-commercial handling oriented, granting of a religious export license to religious body. I'm looking at the administrative aspects in managing that, and I think Senator Mitchell did allude to probably the export license being based on the altruistic needs of helping of religious bodies here, helping other religious bodies internationally. But I think we are dealing here with a religious right under the legislation versus a religious need in terms of having to export for altruistic needs. And I think if we're looking at legislation in incremental steps, why should we be going to such an extent in terms of granting that religious export license, which is why I'm proposing it be deleted for now.
Senator Lashmidia.
Chair, I want to support the proposed amendment by Senator Timal simply because one of the concerns that I had, which I raised, is the abuse of non-profit organizations and this religious, the provisions for religion. I'm all in favor of, acknowledging the religious freedoms of persons who wish to utilize this as part of their religious practices. But when you introduce a provision which permits export, I think you're creating a situation where it will actually become attractive for someone to perhaps abuse those provisions for commercial gain. And so I don't think that I understand the explanation put forward by Minister Mitchell, but I don't think that it is sufficiently serious for us to say that we need to include this type of license for a religious body, because if you look at the possibility of someone abusing a non-profit organization, becoming regulated and establishing this to promote religious freedom, and weigh it against the possibility that somebody in Trinidad has a branch outside that they need to export marijuana to them for use in their religious proceedings or whatever, I think it weighs in favor of, being cautious on not permitting an export license for religious purposes because of the risk of commercialization and monetizing that type of license under the radar and avoiding taxes and so on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not support the amendment proposed by Senator Timal. I adopt and endorse the remarks which were given earlier today by Senator Mitchell as a completely proper and policy explanation for the provisions of the bill, and in the circumstances I would ask that the amendment not be accepted.
Senator Timal, are you willing to withdraw your proposed amendment?
Respectfully, no. Chairman.
Okay, very well, that's all right. The question is that Clause 29 be amended as circulated by Senator Timal. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no.
No. Division.
I think the noes have it.
Division.
Sure.
Mr. Amor?
What is the question, please? Can I get it very clear?
The amendment that made by President Timal, which he did not want to withdraw, division was called after there was a resounding no, and Senator Mark called a division, and it's up to us by saying yes or no if we want.
No, I do not want Senator Timal.
As in your explanation, thank you.
Ms. Gopi Schoon?
No.
Mr. Sinanan?
No.
Ms. West?
No.
Mr. Mitchell?
No.
Ms. Cox?
No.
Mr. Bacchus?
No.
Mr. De Freitas?
No.
Mrs. Sagram Singh Suklal?
No.
Mrs. Lazama Leasing?
No.
Mr. Hislop?
No.
Mr. Boris?
No.
Mr. Thomas?
No.
Mr. Seals?
No.
Ms. Bethelmy?
No.
Mr. Mark?
Yes.
Ms. Lakshmi Diyal?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
No.
Mr. Vieira?
No.
Dr. Dayal Singh?
No.
Ms. Sipasad?
No.
Mr. Timal?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson-Ahi?
No.
Dr. Remy? Dylan Remy?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the result of the division is 5 members voted for the amendment, 20 senators voted against, there were 0 abstentions.
Senators, the results of the division are as follows. 5 senators voted yes, 20 voted no, and there were 0 abstentions. The proposed amendment by Senator Timal for 29. Where is it? 29 doesn't carry. The question is that Clause 29 be amended as circulated by the Attorney General and Senator Richards. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable Senators, the question is that Clause 29 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 29 as amended now stands part of the bill.
Clause 30.
The question is that Clause 30 stand part of the bill. Senator Richards, you have an amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you to the Honorable Attorney General, I have presented in my participation in the bill at 39, which states an applicant for a license who knowingly provides false or misleading information to the authority commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $150,000 and to imprisonment for a term of 2 years. And I found, given the intonations of several speakers of the billion-dollar nature of this industry, that was a mild penalty, which is easily affordable by players in this sector, and it should be raised to $250,000 as a suggestion.
Chair, may I ask your leave before we go to Senator Richards's proposed amendment to Section 30? May I ask your leave to correct something with respect to Section 29, please? In my original amendments, I had proposed an amendment to Section 29(3)(b) to delete the words storage and. But on reflection, when I looked at Senator Richards's other amendments for the entirety of 29(b), I accepted the words storage and. So to the extent that I had earlier proposed the deletion of the word storage and in 29(3)(b), I would like to withdraw that amendment and to leave in the words storage and dispensing of cannabis, so as to be consistent with the entirety of Senator Richards's amendments, which I had supported.
Having withdrawn
I was calling it over.
your amendment,
I have to call it over. Clause 29.
the question is that Clause 29 be amended as circulated by Senator Richards. Those in favor say aye.
And amended by the Attorney General and further amended by withdrawing.
3B, storage and.
Question is that Clause 29 be amended as circulated by Senator Richards and further
Unamended
amended by the Attorney General and accepted the withdrawal of
the amendment
the amendment of the Attorney General.
29(3)(b).
My amendment, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
29(3)(b).
Of 29(3)(b). Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable Senators, the question is that Clause 29, as amended, now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 29, as amended, now stands part of the bill.
Clause 30.
The question is that Clause 30 stand part of the bill. Senator Richards.
Thank you, Chair. Should I repeat the rationale?
I have the rationale,
Very well,
Chair,
yes.
and I accept the rationale. I have no objection to increasing the fine to $250,000 as proposed by Senator Richards.
Senator Richards, would you be so...
No, we just put the question. We accept it now.
Okay.
May I suggest that the language of Senator Richards's amendment in the penultimate line that says for a term of up to 2 years, that the words up to should be deleted. It will read for a term of 2 years.
The question is that Clause 30 be amended as circulated by Senator Richards and further amended by the Attorney General to read as follows. Subsection 9. An applicant for a license who knowingly provides false or misleading information to the authority commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $250,000 and to imprisonment for a term of 2 years. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable Senators, the question is that Clause 30, as amended, now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 30, as amended, now stands part of the bill.
Clause 31.
The question is that Clause 31 stand part of the bill. The question is that Clause 31 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 31 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 32.
The question is that Clause 32 stands part of the bill. Senator Welch?
Chairman, I had proposed an amendment to 32(2)D, and perhaps the Honorable's Attorney General's explanation as to shall and may make earlier may cover this. But before finding out if that is in fact the Attorney General's position, I just want to briefly explain my concern with this. And that is, if these are the factors which the authority shall decide whether to grant a license or not, in light of the fact that there are always the possibility of accusations of discrimination, accusations of favoritism, etc., I am of the view that there should be specified the factors which would influence the authority's discretion. And it should not be that the authority, such other matters as may be prescribed, because may means they may not prescribe any factors. And I believe as a matter of transparency, the factors which would influence the discretion to grant a license or not, there should definitely be factors. They should be established in advance so that an applicant can understand why he has been granted or refused a license. And the authority should not have the option of not prescribing the factors which would influence whether it grants a license or not. And finally, I submit the matters referred to at 32(2)A, B, and C are very generic. They are not really the factors which would influence. So the authority should be called upon to specify in advance. And that is why I have suggested mandatory language, shall instead of may.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In answer to Mr. Welch, first of all, Section 3, the definition section at page 5, tells us that prescribed means prescribed by regulation. So when we read Section 32, subsection 2D, such other matters as may be prescribed, we are referring there to the possibility that in due course, the authority by regulations made under Section 67 may prescribe further circumstances that are applicable to whether or not it shall grant a license. When those further prescriptive measures are regulated for, the transparency will exist ex facie the regulations passed, and there can be no question then that the person will not know the basis on which his license has been approved or not approved. So I do not support the amendment.
Senator Welch, do you withdraw your proposed amendment?
No, Mr. Chairman, because for the simple reason that
Okay, no problem. We'll put it to a vote. The question is that clause 32 be amended as circulated by Senator Welch. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the noes have it. Is that clause 32 now stands part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 32 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 33.
The question is that clause 33 stand part of the bill. The question is that clause 33 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 33 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 34.
The question is that clause 34 now stand part of the bill. Senator Lachmidial, you had a suggestion, a proposed amendment.
Yes, Chair, through you, I raised my concern about 34.4 and it being a condition of getting a license that you must consent to the entry of inspectors, particularly because the bill prescribes that inspectors could be accompanied by police officers. What you're essentially saying is that if you wish to have a license, you must subject yourself to essentially search and seizure by a civilian or a police officer. And if you do not comply, when you read Section 32, failure to comply and to comply with this as a condition means that you may not be renewed or you will not be renewed when your renewal comes up or your license could be revoked and so on. So I believe that there are constitutional issues here, and I flag it and I raise the issue. I do not see that it is necessary. There are many other regulatory bodies which conduct on-site inspections to ensure compliance with laws, and it's not a condition of the license. This is a creature of legislation introduced very recently by this administration, and I think that it is not in keeping with a country that has respect for rights and freedoms of individuals.
Thank you, Chairman. It's interesting that Senator Lachmidial introduced rights. This clause, subclause 34.4, is a purely voluntary act on the part of someone who wishes to engage in business as prescribed by this bill when it becomes law. And the due process requirements are that if that person wishes to engage, then that person must subscribe to the language of the legislation. They may not wish to subscribe, in which case they don't. So there's no question of this offending any rights. The person who wishes to get a license will either apply or not, depending on whether they accept the condition prescribed in 34.4. I therefore do not propose the deletion of section 34.4.
Senator Lachmidial, do you wish to withdraw your proposed amendment?
No, please, Chairman. I wish for it to be on the record that I propose this amendment.
Very well. We'll propose the question. The question is that clause 34 be amended as circulated by Senator Lachmidial. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the noes have it. The amendment does not carry. The question is that clause 34 stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 34 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 35.
The question is that clause 35 stand part of the bill. Senator Lachmidial, you had a proposed amendment.
Chair, given the significant investment that someone may have to make in order to enter this industry, for the different types of licenses, for example, processing and so on, I felt that 3 years is a short space of time, and if you wish to create some more certainty and attractiveness to the industry, you may want to consider, or at least give the authority the power to grant a license up to 5 years if they are satisfied. That way, someone doesn't have to wonder if after 3 years they may have their license revoked and, waste that type of thing. Yeah, sorry. Subject, unless previously revoked, the license shall be valid for a period not exceeding 3 years. So I just wanted to change 3 to 5.
Attorney General?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I keep 3. I don't agree with 5, and I therefore do not accept the amendment. I think that in the incremental phase that I have described, where we are introducing novel new legislation, it is prudent that we keep the period to 5 as opposed to 3.
Senator Lakshmi Dayal,
To 3 as opposed to 5, I beg your pardon.
do you wish to withdraw?
No, Chair, no, I don't.
The question is,
The wording says for a period not exceeding. So you can go up to 5 years, but they could still grant it for 3 if it is in the discretion of the authority, as the Attorney General described as an incremental phase. And that's why I don't accept that as a justification. So I wish to maintain.
Understood. The question is that clause 35 be amended as circulated by Senator Lakshmi Dayal. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the noes have it. The amendment does not carry. The question is that clause 35 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 35 now stands part of the bill.
Clauses 36 to 43.
The question is that clauses 36 to 43 now stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 36 to 43 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 36 to 43 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 44.
Any amendments proposed?
Yes.
Okay. The question is that clause 44 stand part of the bill.
Senator Richards, the Attorney General.
Attorney General?
Thank you, Chair. I propose in the first instance the deletion of subparagraph C of paragraph 1, that is to say, C, acting in the best interest of the patient. And I propose, secondly, in subparagraph A, after the word or, to insert the word or after A to introduce subparagraph B. And then in that paragraph B, delete the word safety or and substitute the word safety. So it would read medical requirements for his care or no, medical requirements for his care. It will end there. Yes.
Yes.
No.
Oh, yes, thank you. It will be medical requirements for his care or safety, full stop. Full stop.
Yeah. Let's put in.
You had an amendment to this?
Yes. With respect to 44.1, I have proposed to insert the words with the consent of a person designate that person after the words a patient may. So it should read, a patient may, with the consent of a person, designate that person a caregiver. And the reason for that is that I do not think that a patient ought to have the power to unilaterally designate a person their caregiver without that person's consent, bearing in mind the section imposes certain obligations on that caregiver. That person to be designated caregiver should have a choice as to whether he should be a caregiver or not. That's my first suggested amendment. I've also suggested the deletion of 44.4, which says a person who is designated as a caregiver under this act shall obtain from a medical practitioner a certificate that states that the caregiver is not addicted to a dangerous drug. First of all, how is a medical practitioner to know whether the caregiver is addicted to a dangerous drug or not? And secondly, how could one impose on a caregiver an obligation to obtain a certificate from a medical practitioner? That is not, an obligation is being imposed on him not to do something himself, but to obtain something from someone else. He has no control over whether he will obtain that or not, but yet still, if he's designated a caregiver, an obligation is imposed upon him to do something over which he may not necessarily have control. He cannot compel a medical practitioner to provide him with a certificate. So I consider that subclause to be impractical, and it ought to be deleted. And I have also suggested that with respect to a new subclause after subclause 7, which is to the effect that a patient and the person designated as his caregiver shall notify the authority of the designation and give the authority, there shouldn't be that there, give the authority such information as the authority may require in respect of the caregiver. The reason I have suggested that, Mr. Chairman, is because if there is no obligation to notify the authority who is the caregiver in advance, I can anticipate a number of impractical situations arising. Because a person who is designated a caregiver is entitled to transport cannabis on behalf of the patient. And if that person is legally entitled to transport cannabis on behalf of the patient, that person's designation should be known in advance, that they do have such an authority. Because you could have a situation where when someone is found with medicinal cannabis who is not supposed to have it, they can simply say, I am a caregiver. And the patient, the alleged patient can support them. But when that is in fact not the case. So if there is an obligation in advance to inform the authority, then one knows before that person is caught in possession of cannabis that that is a genuine caregiver. And it is not a fallback measure after a person who is not so designated is found in possession.
Thank you, Senator Welch. Attorney General, would you like to respond on the 3 points?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. With respect to Senator Welch's suggestion to amend Section 44, Subsection 1, I agree and accept the insertion of the words in Subsection 1 with the consent of a person, designate that person after the words patient may.
With the consent of another, designate that
So 44.
his caregiver.
I'm being assisted here. If I may just read what I am accepting, prompted by Senator Welch. So 44.1 will read, subject to subsections 2 and 3, a patient may, with the consent of another, designate that other person, his caregiver, and any designated caregiver shall be responsible for. Yes. Shall I ask Ms. I'm reading Ms. Salik's handwriting.
With the consent of another, comma.
And then you have A and B. So that's my first response to Senator Welch's request for an amendment. I've just put it in a different formulation. As far as his suggestion for the deletion of subsection 44.4, I do not accept that either the amendment by deletion or the reason given for it. I don't think that it is out of the resourcefulness of a medical practitioner to state whether someone is addicted to a dangerous drug, and I think it is a caution that is desirable, that can be exercised by this authority to get that assurance. And lastly, with respect to Senator Welch's suggestion to insert a new subsection 8, in principle, I accept his new subsection, and I would suggest that that should read a patient, that is subsection 8, a patient and his designated caregiver shall notify the authority, etc.
Chairman, may I just?
Yes. A patient and his designated caregiver shall notify the authority of the designation, and then it continues.
Senator Welch, based upon subsection A, subsection 1, and the insertion of 8 after 7, would that satisfy your proposed amendments? And I'm also asking if it is you are willing to withdraw Part B, where you've asked to delete subsection 4.
Chair, we support subsection 4. Deletion.
Can I just ask a question of the AG for that?
Please, go right
Thank you.
ahead. Yes.
AG, could you explain to me how a medical practitioner is to establish that a caregiver is not addicted to a dangerous drug if they met once or twice? I'm confused as to how a practitioner can establish that someone is not addicted to a dangerous drug. That seems impracticable to me.
Well, I don't accept that. I think that a medical practitioner who would have the opportunity to examine a person ought to be able to say whether that person is or is not addicted to a dangerous drug.
They're very functional addicts. Very highly functional addicts.
Senator Berry, you wanted to add something to the equation?
No, I share Senator Richards and Senator Welch's concern. I mean, what dangerous drug could be alcohol, you know? It's not just cannabis you're talking about. I think you're putting both the medical practitioner and the caretaker in a very awkward position, and I find it's too invasive, quite frankly.
They are documented, if I could share, there are documented cases of cocaine addicts and marijuana addicts who function for years in high positions undetected in the medical profession itself.
And you don't be this is for the caregiver we speak here, right? Attorney General, would you like to add anything?
I can't add anything further. So I stand by my position.
Very well.
So,
Hold a second. There. But Senator Richards, we are on 44.
No amendment on 44.
You have an amendment on 44 as well?
Yes, but I'm in a conundrum because based on Senator Welch's proposal, well, actually, no. Let me rephrase that. Yeah, the proposal stands, yes, to put a time frame within which the information must be given. That's the rationale for it.
Attorney General?
I have no objection to that time frame within 1 month of the charge.
244.
Change. Change. Beg your pardon.
But if I could, Chair, just add, based on one of Senator Welch's comments, that in fact, I hope I'm not paraphrasing him wrongly, that the change should be known because the caregiver may require to transport cannabis, and a month may be careless in terms of the law circumscribing that. So I don't know that, given Senator Welch's comment about that this is still a safe proposal. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
You would like it to be more contracted than this?
Exactly.
Yes, I follow you. What would you suggest?
I would suggest a week so that the time frame for mischief is lessened.
Yeah.
That, but may I suggest it's placed differently? May I suggest that a patient who changes his caregiver shall, within 1 week of the change, notify his medical practitioner?
I'm comfortable with that.
Senator Richards, as we have placed a little change on not only the timing, right, based on your amendment. So your amendment doesn't hold, but it has been, we have taken into consideration.
Well, I withdraw.
So would you withdraw?
Yes.
Thank you. Since we went to 1 month was his initial suggestion,
1 week.
and then after it went to 1 week, and it was
changed the
placed
position.
elsewhere, right? So the positioning was changed, plus the timing was changed. So his original amendment doesn't stand, right? For both location and the time. So we have asked him to withdraw, seeing that it has been placed elsewhere and changed as well.
Just incorporated.
Right, so we need to go through that entire, because we have a few changes around to go. One moment, yeah. The question is,
44.
the question is that clause 44 be amended as circulated
By the AG
by the AG
and further amended
and further amended,
in
subclause 7,
to read as follows.
to read as follows. A patient who changes his caregiver shall, within 1 week of the change, notify his medical practitioner of the change and give that medical practitioner such information as the medical practitioner may require in respect of the new caregiver. And in 44(1),
To read as follows.
to read as follows. Subject to subsections 2 and 3, a patient may, with the consent of another, designate that person or any other person that
Other person.
with the consent of another comma,
Other person.
that
Okay.
I will start over. Subject to subsections 2 and 3, a patient may, with the consent of another, designate that other person or any other person as a caregiver, and that person shall be responsible for.
That's it. Right?
Yeah.
Everything else, right?
His caregiver.
The question is that clause 44 be amended as follows,
As circulated by the
as circulated by the AG and further amended as follows. 44.1 to read, subject to subsections 2 and 3, a patient may, with the consent of another, designate that other person his caregiver, and that designated caregiver shall be responsible for. Yes, no?
We do this already.
To read, a patient who changes his caregiver shall, within 1 week of the change, notify his medical practitioner of the change and give that medical practitioner such information as the medical practitioner may require in respect of the new caregiver. And to insert a new sub-8 to read, a patient and his designated caregiver shall notify the authority of the designation and give to the authority such information as the authority may require in respect of the caregiver. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable Senators,
Senator Welch's
Honorable Senators, the question is that clause 44B be amended to delete subsection 4 as proposed by Senator Welch. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. Sure.
okay. Right, so we're voting on the deletion of subclause.
We are voting for the deletion of subclause 4 of clause 44.
Subclause 2.4, to be precise.
44
2.4.
2.4.
There is no 44.2.4. No.
There is no 44. It's
44.4
44.4 as it's 44.4 as stated earlier. Okay, thank you. So, yeah. 44.4 is what we are voting to delete.
Mr. Amor.
No.
Ms. Gopi Schoon.
No.
Mr. Sinanan.
No.
Ms. West.
No.
Ms. Cox.
No.
Mr. Bacchus.
No.
Mr. De Freitas.
No.
Mrs. Sagram Singh Suklal.
No.
Mrs. Lizama Lee Singh.
No.
Mr. Hislop.
No.
Mr. Boris.
No.
Mr. Thomas.
No.
Mr. Seals.
No.
Ms. Bethelmy.
No.
Mr. Mark.
We agreed to think of it because we did not want
Mr. Lido.
Mr. Richards,
Yes.
Mr. Vieira,
Yes.
Dr. Dial Singh,
Yes.
Ms. C. Prasad,
Yes.
Mr. Timal,
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson-Aye,
Yes.
Dr. Dylan Remy,
No.
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell,
But I shall know. Sorry?
as follows. 7 members voted for the amendment, 16 members voted against the amendment, and 3 members abstained from voting.
Senators, the result of the division are as follows. 7 voted for the deletion of 44-4. 16 voted against the deletion, and 3 abstained. Clause 44-4 remains.
And so now you have to put.
Honourable Senators, the question is that Clause 44, as amended, now stands part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 44, as amended, now stands part of the bill. 45 to 46.
Clauses 45 to 46.
The question is that clauses 45 to 46 stand part of the bill. The question is that clause 45 to 46 now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 45 to 46 stand part of the bill.
Clause 47.
The question is that clause 47 stand part of the bill.
We have amendments from Senator Richards
We
and
have-
Senator Timal.
We have amendments from Senator Timal, who are allowed to go first, followed by Senator Richards. Senator Timal?
Yeah, I'm proposing that in subparagraph C, that we insert the words at a regulated frequency after the word adherent, because that subsection specifies 30 grams, a quantity, but I am of the opinion that we should add a frequency to that dispensing. For just the quantity can't stand alone, because should it be 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 2 days, a week? So I'm suggesting that a frequency be tied in, which is why I'm suggesting at a regulated frequency to be added after the word adherent.
Senator Paul Richards?
Chair, for the same reason articulated by Senator Timal, when I read the subclause, I found it was lacking specificity and did not specify the 30 grams in what time frame. So while I put within a 1 month of the change, I'm not married to that if a suitable frequency can be established.
Attorney General, it seems as both senators are asking with the same light of some level of time frame and dosage to place controls. Attorney General.
In principle, Chairman, I don't have a difficulty with a time frame, but Senator Timal's language at a regulated frequency, I think, is not sufficiently precise. So I believe Senator Richards suggested within 1 month. I didn't hear what he suggested.
It was within a 48-hour period.
Within a 48-hour period.
Senator Vera, you wanted to add something?
I was just wondering whether this exempt event could include something like the Shivaratri festival in Nepal, which lasts several days.
The exempt event is clause 48. Clause 47 here is dealing with the sacramental dispensary. Yeah. Attorney General, I know you said it's at a regulated frequency. I know Senator Richards is proposing 48 hours. But in terms of the particular religious group, I don't know if we specify like 48 hours, we would be infringing on probably a religious right, because they may be dispensing maybe every 24 hours. We don't know. So this is why I framed it at a regulated frequency, so that it could be picked up in the regulations later down the road.
Chair?
I just have to ask for clarity. Would that be based on need and faith-based and specific? Okay.
Yeah, it'll be driven by the practices of the
Very well.
of the respective faith. And if we go to put an exact time, I don't know if it will be infringing on the actual practices, which defeats the purpose of the religious rights that we are trying to give.
Attorney General.
Bearing in mind what Senator Timal has just said, and the consideration has to do with being careful that we don't interfere with a religious order, it may be, and I suggest this, that we can provide, as he has said, at a regulated frequency as may be prescribed. And that would allow regulations to then be brought into effect, which could be more particular after consultation by the authority. No, as may be prescribed, which would allow for the regulations to prescribe. So at a regulated frequency as may be prescribed.
Senator Richards, you wanted to comment? I'm not hearing you yet.
I would have no problem with that. It would address the issue I had, and so I withdraw mine and defer to that suggestion.
Thank you. Thank you.
It can be interpreted to mean that it may be or it may not be. Why not as will be prescribed? So then you know it will be there in the regulations.
Defined in the definition sections prescribed by the regulation. So all you're doing is making a provision in the enabling legislation to signal to the authority that they will now need to pass regulations to regulate the frequency. It casts an obligation that they must discharge.
I will close you in.
Yes.
Chair?
Sure, Dr. Delanami.
Since any person, including those who are using the substance for sacrament, they have the ability to have within their possession 30 grams of cannabis. Is there a need for them to have it dispensed by the dispensary? In other words, they can get it from anywhere. Why put it here in the legislation? If it's 30 grams, and in other words, you're not putting an increased amount.
care of by the regulator. With respect, Chair, through you, in answer to the Senator, that too will have to be looked at by the regulation. So it's something that they will have to pay particular attention to.
Okay.
The question is that clause 47 be amended as circulated and by Senator Timal and further amended to include the words as may be prescribed after the word frequency. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable Senators, the question is that clause 47 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 47 as amended now stands part of the bill.
Clause 48.
The question is that clause 48 stand part of the bill. Senator Timal and Senator Lachmidial and no, we have one here from Senator Welch as well.
48?
48 1A.
Yes, 48.
Yes, so we shall start with Senator Lachmidial, then Senator Timal, and then we'll follow by Senator Welch.
I defer to Senator Mark.
Sure, Senator Mark, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, through you to the Honorable Attorney General. Honorable Attorney General, would you have an objection under 48.1 to place after the word order subject to an affirmative resolution of the Parliament? Would you have any objection? So we'd like to propose that with your consent.
Subject to affirmative resolution.
Chairman, I was proposing the deletion of clause 48, but on further consideration, I would defer my request for deletion because I think that it would infringe on the religious rights that we are trying to safeguard by this legislation, and the fact that the Attorney General has accepted the proposal by Senator Mark to have the order subjected to affirmative resolution of Parliament. It offers that opportunity for the order to be debated so that the amounts and the terms and conditions of the order would be subjected to affirmative resolution. So I withdraw my
Thank you, Senator Timal. And lastly, on 48.1A, Senator Welch.
Yes, I have suggested with respect to 48.1A, the words an adherent be substituted by a controller of the religious organization. And the reason I say that is because, first of all, the adherents do not need to be registered or specified. And I think it is open season if everyone who says I am an adherent can simply apply and get an event to be exempted. That is too wide a class of persons. It should be someone holding a responsible position in the organization, which is the controller of the organization, the head of it, as opposed to every single follower being able to apply for any event to be exempt, even if it isn't even sanctioned by the controller of the organization.
Senator Welch, would the accepted amendment, which is to insert subject to affirmative resolution of Parliament, help out your argument?
No, because it still leaves it open to all kinds of
Very well.
persons and any number
Very
of
well,
persons.
understood. AG?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I accept this suggested amendment subject to one further amendment. Members will recall that earlier this evening, an amendment was proposed by Senator Richards to introduce the definition of religious organization. That definition speaks of leaders, followers, adherents, devotees, or congregation. So I would prefer that Senator Welch use the word leader of a religious organization to be consistent with the language of the amendment we had previously passed.
I can accept that.
Thank you, Senator Welch. Senator Vera, yes.
Thank you. Chair, I want to support Senator Timol's position. I think going the route of an affirmative resolution for debate in Parliament is overkill. A religious organization have made an application, they write to the minister, we are going to have this particular event. An order should suffice. To come to Parliament to have it debated, I mean, it's just really too much.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Honorable Senator.
Honorable, the question is that Clause 48 be amended as circulated by Senator Lachmidial. And those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Go ahead.
You have to now put
I have to put the other
the
two.
amendment by.
With your leave, I'm attracted by the, let me explain this first. I had been earlier influenced by Section 67 of the bill, but that is more substantive than what we are dealing with now in terms of the religious event. Regulation 67 had said that regulations made under this act shall be subject to affirmative resolution of Parliament. That is acceptable. But I do accept on reservation, on rethinking my position, that amending 48.1 for an order to be subject to affirmative resolution of Parliament in the language of Senator Vera. And I apologize to all members for recalling my previous position, is overkill, and I would not support the word subject to affirmative resolution.
Chair, if I may. Sorry. Well, then would the minister consider adding negative resolution? Because in the case of an event like this, for example, let me give you an example, where it is being held in a particular constituency, the member of parliament may wish to have the opportunity to raise an objection via a negative resolution and have it brought to the parliament to air the concerns. Because what you are doing here is the minister may, by order, without anybody even knowing, grant approval for an event where cannabis will be transported to and supplied and used and exempt events, and people could be gathering, in large numbers in a particular area of this country, and the representatives for those areas ought to have an opportunity to, at least as responsible representatives, raise the matter in the parliament and perhaps take it to a vote and bring it to the attention and have it debated. So at least consider a negative resolution.
Attorney General.
Shut your backside.
We could go the negative, and at least, people can...
Thank you, Senator Mark and Senator Lachmidial, but my reconsidered position is to keep it simple, so I would not support either a negative or an affirmative resolution.
Okay, so I have to put the question again then. So the question is that clause 48 be amended as...
The question is that clause 48 be amended as circulated by Senator Lachmidial. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. I think the noes have it.
The question is that clause 48
The question is that Clause 48 be amended
Circulated by Senator Welch.
as circulated by Senator Welch
Further amended.
and further amended
To replace the word controller with the word leader.
to replace the word controller with leader. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. That's it.
Yeah.
Honorable Senators, the question is that Clause 48, as amended, now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 48, as amended, now stands part of the bill.
Clauses 49 to 59.
The question is that clauses 49 to 59 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 49 to 59 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Wanted to draw, there's a typo at 56. It says referred to in section 52.2, but it should really be referred to in section 51.2.
The vote holds.
It's fixed in the amended version. The amended version we have has it fixed in.
So it's been picked up. Okay, thank you.
No problem, Senator. The vote holds for 49 to 59. Clauses 49 to 59 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 60.
The question is that Clause 60 stand part of the bill. We have the Attorney General and Senator Lakshmi Dayal with proposed amendments. Attorney General?
I had withdrawn that amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So I'm not proposing any amendment to 63. It stands as circulated.
Okay. Senator Lakshmi Dayal?
I renew my objection to, based on the fact that you must agree as a condition of your license to allow an inspector to come into your premises, the fact that the inspector, without any justification, such as reasonable cause to suspect a breach or something like that, can just come into your premises with a police officer. I think that doesn't pass it as a proportionality. So I object to it. Surat. Go and read Surat.
Attorney General?
I don't accept that. I think that 60 subsection 3 as circulated, an inspector who is conducting an inspection may be accompanied by a police officer, leaves a discretion to the inspector depending on the circumstances, and I support it as read.
The question is that Clause 60 be amended as circulated by Senator Lakshmi Dayal. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the noes have it. The question is that Clause 60 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 60 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 61.
Any amendments? The question is that Clause 61 stand part of the bill. The question is that Clause 61 stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 61 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 62.
Clause 62. The question is that Clause 62 stand part of the bill. Senator Lakshmi Dayal, you have a...
Chair, I raise again the concern that the taking of photographs, the making copies of documents and records and seizing anything which may be of evidential value for the prosecution of an offense is clothing an inspector with essentially police powers, an inspector who will be entering your premises without notice, without a warrant, and I think that it goes too far, and I'm objecting to it on the grounds of, as a simple majority bill, I think that it goes way too far in terms of an incursion upon the rights of citizens.
Noted. Attorney General?
I don't accept those reasons. I think that the proportionate powers of the inspector, particularly given the fact that the applicant for a license has consented to an inspector coming onto his premises, are reasonable, and I therefore reject the proposed amendment.
The question is that clause 62 be amended as circulated by Senator Lakshmi Diya. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the noes have it. The question is that clause 62 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 62 now stands part of the bill.
Clauses 63 to 67.
The question is that clauses 63 to 67 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 63 to 67 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 63 to 67 now stand part of the bill.
Clause 7 revisited.
Did 14 and 15 and 7 not were related?
Yeah.
All of those were related, correct? Please, go ahead.
Consider 14 in the context of the others, and I find 14 to be completely superfluous because, firstly, you are not allowed, if you're subject to, of course, the Dangerous Drugs 2019 amendment, if you have a pecuniary interest, you're not allowed to serve on the board. Under Section 7, within 7 days of becoming engaged or employed in the handling or acquiring this interest, you must inform the board and you must resign. So then, what is the point of 14? That you have to do this thing on the anniversary, within a month after your appointment on the anniversary, make this declaration and failing to comply and so on. If you do not make the declaration under 7 when it occurs, then there's a criminal offense there. So I think 14 should just be abandoned altogether. I don't see the point of it.
I tend to agree with that, Chair, and in fact, I have recast 7 so that if it is accepted, then 14 could go by the wayside.
And how does that relate to 15, in your opinion? 14 and 15 were linked. I believe 14 and 15 were linked.
No, it was 6,
7 and 14 were linked.
6, 7, and 14, yeah.
6, 7.
So.
14 and 15 that were linked, where the Attorney General indicated he would, it would be left for him to do the drafting in principle.
To import the language which made an allowance for the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act into 15.2. So that's the link with 15. That's the only link, I think.
That's
I
the
don't
only
think
link,
the other-
yes. I remember both were being considered
Right.
at the same time. And then afterwards, we found the link backwards to 7.
So the same allowance that we're making for the board, the employees, and the CEO in general, that the interest is subject to the allowance made in the Dangerous Drugs 2019 amendment, I think it has to be consistent. That you can't have an interest subject to, of course, the handling partner with the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act. So you could have your 30 grams or how much ever on your 4 plants, but you can't have any other type of interest.
Yes.
That has to be addressed at the same time. Correct. And then there was a small matter of 16. Attorney General, please.
May I express my gratitude to Senators Vera and Lachmidial. So if we were to start if we were to start with Clause 7. Clause 7, 1 and 2 remain, that is to say, chairman or deputy chairman may at any time resign, etc. A member other than the chairman or deputy chairman may resign from office. So those two remain. And then 7.3 would then read, and it's a new 7.3 right through to 7.6, that I am accepting as proposed by the senators. 7.3, the board shall take all reasonable steps to identify. The board shall take all reasonable steps to identify and keep under review any potential conflicts of interest. Excuse me. 7.4, any potential conflicts of interest. So just to reread that, 7.3, the board shall take all reasonable steps to identify and keep under review, comma, any potential conflicts of interest. All, any potential conflicts of interest. Yes. You have that? 7.4, a member who has an actual or contingent pecuniary interest shall, as soon as possible, after the relevant facts come to his knowledge, disclose in writing to the board and to the president the nature of that interest. And then we have next section 7, subsection 5. Subject to the following provisions of this paragraph, a member of the board shall vacate office, and then we put a line and we go to A and B. A, a member of the board shall vacate office, A, if he is in any way directly or indirectly engaged or employed in the handling of cannabis, semicolon, or B, if he has acquired an actual or contingent pecuniary interest in any company, firm, or other entity which is regulated by the authority. And then section 7, subsection 6 reads, a board member who, comma, without reasonable excuse, comma, fails to comply with this section shall be guilty of an offense fails to comply with this section, commits an offense, instead of shall be, commits an offense, and is liable on summary conviction to a fine and I'm going to read the sum here and invite Senator Richards' comment, to a fine of $150,000 and imprisonment for a term of 2 years.
And I was thinking that it should be harmonized with the amendment we made earlier on.
That's precisely why I made that interjection. So, and I would accept that, to a fine of $250,000 and imprisonment for a term of 2 years. So that would be the comprehensive amendments that we would make by deleting the existing subparagraphs of 7 as circulated by me, 7, 3, and 4, and replacing them with what I have just read, 3 to 6, 7, 3 to 6. And then, with your leave, Mr. Chairman, sections 14 and 15 would be amended consequently, so that section 14.1 would commence subject to the, sorry? Oh, you're not ready for 14, sorry. I'm sorry. In 5, 7.5. subject to the following provisions of this paragraph, yes, subject to the following provisions of this paragraph, a member of the board shall vacate office. So it goes 7.3 through to 7.6. That's correct. 7.1 and 2 remain as is, as circulated. Let me see your 14. So that's subject to the provisions of sections 5.2. That's 5.
What is 5.2?
No, sorry. Okay.
We need to read one. It should be amended as follows, and you read
The
from
question is that clause 7 be amended as follows.
subclause 3.
Subclause 3. The board shall take all reasonable steps to identify and keep under review any potential conflicts of interest. Subsection 4. A member who has an actual or contingent pecuniary interest shall, as soon as possible after the relevant facts come to his knowledge, disclose in writing to the board and to the president the nature of that interest. Subsection 5 to read, subject to the following provisions of this paragraph, a member of the board shall vacate office. A, if he is in any way directly or indirectly engaged or employed in the handling of cannabis, or B, if he has acquired an actual or contingent pecuniary interest in any company, firm, or other entity which is regulated by the authority. 6. A board member who, without reasonable excuse, fails to comply with this section commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $250,000 and imprisonment for a term of 2 years. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable Senators, the question is that clause 7 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 7 as amended now stands part of the bill.
Clause 6 revisited. as circulated by Senator Welch at 6 subclause 6.
Okay.
Yeah?
The question is that clause 6, subclause 6, be amended as circulated by Senator Welch. Those in favor?
Give them a little time to make sure.
Sure. Those in favor, say aye. Those against, say no. I think the noes have it. Honorable Senators, the question is that clause 6, as amended, now stand part of the bill. Those in favor, say aye.
Just 6 at a time.
Those against, say no.
Yeah, okay. Go on.
Chair, I am.
Your turn.
I think the ayes have it. Clause 6, as amended, now stands part of the bill.
Chair, what's the amendment for clause 6?
The amendment that was previously agreed.
There was a previous amendment.
By Senator Welch?
No, there was just that one part of his proposed amendment that we didn't put forward. The Attorney General had an amendment as circulated.
So that's the amendment we are voting
Correct.
on now, the Attorney General's.
Yes.
Yeah. We said that.
Yes.
To add in medicine and psychiatry and public health.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, so we're going back now to...
Please
Clause
allow me
14
to...
revisited.
Chair?
Just now. Sir.
Please allow me to ask one question on clause 7. I know it has already been voted on, but there was an amendment about the people who are on the board and the CEO. They should not be discriminated against by the clause with the Dangerous Drug Act, which Senator Welch had put in. I didn't hear any of that in your amendment that you brought, the long amendment that you just brought.
Yes, that is, we're coming to that in clause 14.
Okay.
And 15, yeah. Senator Lashmidial?
Amendment has to also be placed in 6.3. So I know you said you voted on the amendment that when Senator Dilrami asked, he said it's only the amendment moved by the Attorney General to increase the number, but I think that we had agreed previously that 3 would be amended. No person appointed to the board shall become engaged in the handling, and you put in subject to the Dangerous Drug Act section, whatever. So it's 2 amendments to section 6. The Attorney General's amendment on, right?
Yeah, and we have already done those 2.
Right. So
correct. It's just that we didn't offer we didn't put the question for Senator Welch's amendment. That's why we went back.
Which is the Service Commission, the
correct.
salary.
The salary review.
Right, good.
Correct.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
The amendment that I propose to 14 revisited is 14.1. The amendment shall commence subject to the provisions of Section 5, subsection 2F and G of the Dangerous Drugs Act. Every member shall within 1 month after his appointment, and it continues as circulated by the Attorney General. So clauses 1, 2, and 3 remain as is, but subject to the provisions of, as I've just read.
Provisions of the Dangerous Drugs.
And we are deleting subsection 3 of 14. No prosecution of an offense under this section may be instituted without the written consent of the Director of Public Prosecutions. That is being deleted. So section 14 will consist of 2 subsections introduced. Yes. Section 5, 2, F and G, subject to the provisions of Section 5, 2, F and G of the Dangerous Drugs Act, every member shall.
AG, is this the one we harmonize the fine also already in part 2?
Sorry, I didn't get that through you, Chair.
Is this the same one we harmonized the fine in part 2, where we raised the fine to 250,000 from 150?
Yes, I would accept that, Chair. Subsection 14.2, the fine of 150,000 would be changed to 250,000. Thank you, Senator Richards.
I'm actually still awake.
What's that?
And then Section 15, with your leave, Chair. No, sorry. Oh, no, so we're taking it one at a time. Yeah.
Senator Dashminian.
14. We're keeping 14 about the declaration of the interest on the anniversary. But again, I don't understand why we need to keep it if under 7 and so on, those matters would result in you having to resign. That's what I'm saying. I thought it was a bit superfluous. If it is that under 7, once the interest arises and you've included in your amendment that once it arises, you must declare it. And if these are the circumstances, then you have to send your resignation. Why do you need to keep it as here that you must keep declaring it on the anniversary?
Well, I think it's through you, Chair, sorry. I think it's out of an abundance of caution and ongoing obligation to continue to make that declaration.
Okay.
7.3 applies at the beginning, and you continue on the anniversary to make the declaration.
I hear you. I'm thinking that it could lead to the impression that a person who fits this criteria, as in engaged or employed in handling an actual pecuniary interest, could remain as a member and declare every year, when 7 clearly says that you have to resign if you fit that criteria, whereas this suggests that you could remain. So I think it's a little, conflict, and it's a bit confusing. If you're making provision for the persons to stay and declare ongoing every year, then why say that they must resign under 7? It's either you're conflicted or you're not conflicted. And if you're conflicted and you have to resign, well, then there's no need to have a provision to say, well, keep declaring every year. Under 7, you should have a period of time to declare and to send in your resignation. And that's it.
I would err on the side of caution. Through you, Chair, I would err on the side of caution, Senator Lachmidial, but I would make one change. Given that in Section 7.4, we changed the language to have the disclosure to be made in writing to the board and to the president, I would keep Section 14.1 consistent so that it shall be to submit to the board and the president a declaration in the approved form.
Like I said, I think it could be confusing to someone to know whether or not they have to resign under 7 if the interest arises, the conflict of interest, or whether 14 permits them to stay on. And I think that confusion is unnecessary. If it is the policy underlying the bill that once you are conflicted, you must resign, whether it is declaring in the beginning and resigning, or whenever it arises, you must declare it and resign, then creating a section which permits a person to declare their interest and to do it every year suggests that you could have this conflict and that confusion, I think, is,
Are you opposed to the redundancy?
Well, I don't think it's redundant. I think it's...
No, if it's a redundant,
Well,
if it's placed as a redundant aspect, are you opposed to that?
Yes, because I don't see it as necessary to create any situation where a person should be allowed, once the conflict arises, to stay on and make a declaration. That's what we were speaking about before with whether or not, I think the proposal coming from Senator Vera was that you declare and you step out and all that, but that is clearly in conflict with Section 7. Section 7 says you can't say you must resign, but then say, well, but if you stay, well, continue to declare every year. Why would you stay? Why would we allow them to stay? Under what circumstances do you anticipate that someone having a conflict of interest under 7, whether it arises in the beginning, the middle, or the end, which should be the end, would be captured by 14?
Chair, with respect. Subject to the amendment that I propose, which is submit to the board and to the president in writing whether or not delete the minister, subject to the board and the president. In writing, whether or not so what is being deleted is to the minister a declaration in the approved form. Subject to the board and the president in writing, whether or not he A, B, subsection 2 stays in and 3 goes. And then there's a fine of $250,000. Pardon me?
The question is that clause 14 be amended as follows. Subject to the provisions of section 5(2) F and G of the Dangerous Drugs Act, every member shall, within 1 month after his appointment and on each anniversary of his appointment, submit to the board and the president in writing whether or not he, A, is engaged or employed in the handling of cannabis, or B, has an actual or contingent pecuniary interest in any company, firm, or other entity which is regulated by the authority. Two?
Deleting 150,000 and putting in 250,000.
To delete the figure of 150,000 and to change it to 250,000, and imprisonment for a term of 2 years, and the deletion of subsection 3. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable Senators, the question is that clause 14, as amended, now stands part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 14, as amended, now stands part of the bill.
Clause 15 revisited.
I would propose one amendment to clause 15, and that is subsection 2 should commence with the words, subject to the provisions of section 5(2) F and G of the Dangerous Drugs Act, and then continue. No person appointed as chief executive officer, and everything else stays.
The question is that clause 15 be amended as follows. 15 subsection 2 to read, subject to the provision of Section 5(2) F and G of the Dangerous Drugs Act, no person appointed as Chief Executive Officer shall be or become engaged or employed in the handling of cannabis or have an actual or contingent pecuniary interest in any company, firm, or other entity which is regulated by the authority. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable Senators, the question is that Clause 15, as amended, now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 15, as amended, now stands part of the bill.
Clause 16 revisited.
Mr. Chair, I would like to propose, consistent with the rethink on the sum of the fine, which was earlier introduced by Senator Richards, at subparagraph section 16 sub 7, an employee of the authority or person engaged under subsection 2 who, and then A and B apply with no changes, commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $250,000 in place of $150,000 and imprisonment for a term of 2 years.
The question is that Clause 16 be amended as follows.
Sub 7.
16 subsection 7 subclause 7 shall read, an employee of the authority or a person engaged under subsection 2 who A. contravenes subsection 5 or 6, or B. knowingly makes a false declaration under subsection 5, commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $250,000 and imprisonment for a term of 2 years. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Honorable Senate.
Clause 16 as amended now stands part of the bill.
Clause 16 as amended now stands part of the bill.
Right, so now you finish.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the bill or the bill as amended now be reported to the Senate. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The bill as amended will now be reported to the Senate. Attorney General.
Mr. Vice President, I wish to report that the Cannabis Control Bill 2020 was considered in Committee of the Whole and approved with amendments. I now beg to move that the Senate agree with the committee's report pursuant to Standing Order 69-1.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the Senate agree with the committee's reports on the Cannabis Control Bill 2020. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Attorney General.
Mr. Vice President, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Regulatory Control of the Handling of Cannabis for Certain Purposes, the establishment of the Trinidad and Tobago Cannabis Licensing Authority, and connected matters be now read a third time and passed.
Honorable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Regulatory Control of the Handling of Cannabis for Certain Purposes, the establishment of the Trinidad and Tobago Cannabis Licensing Authority and connected matters be now read a third time and passed. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Regulatory Control of the Handling of Cannabis for Certain Purposes, the establishment of the Trinidad and Tobago Cannabis Licensing Authority, and connected matters.
Leader of Government Business.
Vice President, before moving the motion for the adjournment, I wish to advise that in relation to the matters to be raised on the motion for the adjournment, there has been agreement that both matters will be deferred to a later sitting. Mr. Vice President, I beg to move that the Senate do now adjourn to Friday, May 20th, 2022 at 10 a.m.
Honorable Senators, the question is that this Senate do now adjourn to Friday, May 20th, 2022 at 10 a.m. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The Senate now stands adjourned to Friday, 20th of May, 2022 at 10 a.m.